Today, we're going to be talking about these very special properties. They are so neat. Even when I first talked to you over the phone and you were explaining your properties to me, I was like, wow, this guy cares a lot. I just thought it was really incredible. And I really want to showcase that so other people can get to learn these properties as well as I have and be equally as amazed.
Yeah, and thank you. I can't wait to talk about these properties. I'm very proud of them.
In total, you have six properties. Five of them are very close to one another. And then the sixth is a couple blocks away.
Right.
Yeah, so I do want to start off with the five that are close together. What is the property history? Like, when did you buy it and how long have you had it for? How did you buy it?
Actually, the first of those properties was purchased by my grandfather in 1953. At that time, it was a house. It was a really cool house, actually. It had a staircase that wound all the way from the basement all the way up to the attic, which is now a unit. And he had his entire extended family living in there at one point. That house has been converted into eight separate units now. He was operating three similar properties, including that one on that corner where these properties are. And I started helping him out with managing the properties in 2015. My dad and I decided that I was going to be the new manager. And so I fell into it initially, took over those houses, bought a few more. And now I'm operating a series of lower income units that have done quite well over the years.
Your grandpa acquired these, I think you said back in the 1950s. And
The
then,
first one, yeah.
yeah, and then grandpa passed away. And I believe your dad and you purchased them out of the estate after he passed.
Yes. So the first three we purchased out of the estate as I figured out how to manage and improve these kind of older buildings. I purchased some more and then I built one of my own. I built a brand new one as well.
Yeah, that one's really
Yeah.
cool. There's obviously two empty lots right next to two of them that you own. What's going on with those empty lots next to you?
The one that's immediately adjacent is owned by the city. The one next door to that one is privately owned.
And I think you mentioned the city has been trying to sell that lot for a while too.
Yeah, I had a conversation with the city back in 2018 about that one. They're willing to sell to the right person. They want to set up a sale so that the next person who buys it would be encouraged to develop, which is pretty typical of the city with
Mhm.
their land holdings.
Something really unique about the properties that you're holding on to is you've taken care of a lot of really big expenses just to get the longevity that you can out of the building and to make sure that your tenants are safe and secure and protected. So, what are some big ticket items that you've gone out of your way to complete?
So there's some stuff that you might expect. So all the roofs, all the eaves troughs, almost all of the hot water tanks and furnaces, those have all been replaced within the last 3 to 4 years, some of them more recently than that. Some more unique improvements. So for all of the buildings that have brick foundations, I actually went and did a little bit of foundation work to protect those foundations from water infiltration.
What did you do?
So basically, we trenched out the perimeter and we installed a drip edge and some plywood so that regular weather can't get to the perimeter. Water infiltration is my biggest nightmare. So that's why we did the eaves troughs. That's why we did the roofs. That's why I worked on this protection of the foundation, and it's worked really well for those kind of foundations. Unless you keep up with them, you can have problems, usually with water infiltration, in some cases with bowing. But these ones, after we did all these processes, there's nothing structural that needs to be worried about in any of these properties. There was a really unique situation actually at the building that's a little further away. It was one of the things that was a deciding factor in me buying that building. I didn't do it myself. I wish I was this smart, but those guys didn't have enough room to put an exterior weeping tile system in there. So there's actually an internal weeping tile system that directs water away from the brick foundation. So that foundation also has years of longevity in it. The other things that we've done, basically all the grouped properties have secure fences all the way around. They're locked fences. And we have a centralized 24-hour video surveillance that's monitored on site. So it's about as secure as you can get. For the newer building, there's a parcel box. That was a custom design. It was a collaborative effort between me and the shop that made it for me. But basically, it's for Amazon packages, which wouldn't, in these particular areas, they may or may not have survived just being left outside. for all
Mhm.
day. So we have a big tank of a box. People could get a whole mattress or bed frame delivered into that box from Amazon.
I was curious, how does that work? So anybody can open the front door, and then does it go into a box that you then have to unlock in the back to open?
That's exactly right. So it drops
Okay.
down so that it's far enough that if somebody were to get that far down in there, they'd probably become trapped in the box.
Mhm.
So it's a bit of a mousetrap, but we haven't had any problems. I think it's close enough to where the cameras are located and it's close enough to the building that it's too obvious for somebody to monkey with it from the outside.
Between the stainless steel 6 foot fences, your custom mailbox, the 24-hour like full video surveillance of both the internal common areas and then all of the exterior, you have done a lot to protect your tenants. And on top of that, your tenants seem to be really happy with just the relationship that you have with them as well. I'm curious, have you gotten feedback from your tenants that have lived in a similar location but on a different property?
Yeah, sure. Yes, of course. A few of these kind of styles of properties, especially the SRO style where you have shared facilities like shared bathrooms or shared kitchens, those are run very differently in general from how I run mine. It's night and day. So the typical strategy with the owners of those buildings is basically put as little money into maintaining the buildings as possible, which is a legitimate strategy.
Yep.
It's absolutely a legitimate strategy, and those people they do make money, but you tend to have buildings that are very insecure. You tend to have buildings that have a lot of crime, a lot of noise, and unfortunately, pests become a problem. I have none of those problems. Even conventional apartment buildings that are run that way, they don't do very well.
As you said, it's a very valid business strategy, but the longevity that you get out of the building and the amount of time that you have to sink in managing it and dealing with the tenants and stuff breaking. I think a
Right.
lot of landlords, especially in that area, are very short-sighted, and you're the complete opposite. That's when I was first talking to you, and then when I go went to go see your properties in person, I was just like, wow, like this guy is just above and beyond what I was expecting.
I set up those properties and I did all these upgrades with the intent of making them easier to manage for me. Those security cameras aren't just for external problems. If we move in a tenant who's becoming a problem, it's very easy to identify who is the problem, what the problem is, and deal with it immediately. And that's part of the reason why $40,000 were spent on this comprehensive security camera system, right?
Mhm. Well, and you
So,
also have to protect your other tenants that are in there. Like security cameras shouldn't bother anybody if they're up to only good things, right?
yep.
So that's not just to protect the physical aspects of your property, but also just the culture that you have there.
That's a great point, and that's also one of the reasons. Like number one, I've have some tenants. I still have some tenants that predate me in those properties. I have one guy who's been in a property for I think around 22 years, and I do have a responsibility to those guys. At least I feel that I do have a responsibility to those guys. If they've been a good tenant for that long, I want them to remain a good tenant. And the fact that those buildings are run that way means I have a totally different tenant profile than comparable buildings. Everything is super quiet. People have developed quite a good community where people actually look out for each other in those buildings. And I'm never in the situation where there would be a major problem with the building that I don't know about. Let's say somebody overflows a sink or something that could really cause damage if it wasn't reported immediately. That never happens. We get to those things right away because people actually care about where they live. They recognize the difference between if you're renting a $650 unit, for example, you've been in other units in that price range, and the
Mhm.
difference is night and day, right? You're living in a safe, clean environment. When I'm talking to tenants, I use no bugs, no drugs. And that, even just those two things by themselves, set these properties apart from pretty much any of the other ones, including some government run properties.
What else have you done to structure the management of your properties to make it easier? So you mentioned the security systems. What else have you put in place that has really helped compared to when you first got the properties?
In both locations, I have a direct site supervisor. This is a person who takes a lot of the weight off my shoulders on a day-to-day basis in terms of direct management. This would be a person who they're the first point of contact, right? If there's a tenancy issue or a building issue, call goes through them first. If it's something that they can't deal with directly, then it gets passed up the chain to me. But it really filters out honestly probably 75% of any of the direct management. And these are also guys that, as part of their duties, they're required to go through all the areas of the building on a regular basis. They're
Mhm.
required to take inventory of the stuff that we keep on site, our supplies. We have a basically a workshop in one of the buildings. Usually I'm getting notified in advance if we need some cleaning supplies or if we're down to only one extra fridge, as fridges need to be replaced. We always have that stuff on hand. So things are very seamless as things need to be repaired. And in fact, I would say I get to repairs probably faster than most rentals at any price range,
Mhm.
just
So
because it's
even
really
when I was
organized, right?
at your property, one of them, we were walking through and one of your tenants poked his head out and was saying that Thomas, one of your site soups there, fixed the sink up really well and got on it right away and that he was happy with it. And then I talked briefly to Thomas too, your site soup at the one
Yeah.
location, and he just seemed so grateful and very eager. And you guys obviously had a fantastic relationship. You could just tell watching you guys talk.
Oh, he's an amazing guy. He's a really feel good story. He was so grateful that somebody would give him a chance to be
Mhm.
responsible for something like this, and it shows in his work. He's so gung ho to make sure everything in that building runs smoothly. He knows the tenants' names as fast as I know them, and he's working to make their lives easier and my life easier every single day.
I do want to dive into some property specifics for these listings that you have here. So let's start with the converted house, the 6-0 converted house.
Okay, so that one has 6 units in it. It's as you said, it's a converted house. All of the converted houses are a little unusual, but they work. All the units have some level of shared facilities. So on the main floor, you have larger units that have their own living bedroom area and then their own full-size kitchen, but they would share a toilet room and a shower room. So you've got 3 units that share a separate toilet room and a shower room. So there isn't a heck of a lot of sharing. Super clean, super quiet. On the second floor, it's a little bit more sharing. So you've got another 3 units up there, but they share the kitchen and the bathroom facilities. The other two houses they're similar, but they have more private units. The other two converted houses have 3 private units each. So those would typically be large studio or smaller one bedroom. Basically, all of those fall into that range. And then they have a couple of shared floors where you'd have 3 tenants sharing a kitchen and a bathroom, just like the last one.
Yeah. Is
Yeah.
the 1-3 converted house, is that the one that had the really big one bedroom suite that you showed me?
Yeah, the one with the walk-through
Yeah,
kitchen.
that one was really cool.
So some of the units still have some of the original features of these old buildings. Not a lot of them. The previous owners did their own repairs in their own way. Some of the ones that have some of the original features, like even something as simple as like the original return air grates on them, are like you can tell it's part of the original structure, and they're so cool if you're into that sort of thing. But that unit, I've kept that vacant for maybe a little bit longer than I should because I want to put the right person who appreciates it into that unit.
Yeah, actually, let's talk about that. So, when we were reviewing your property's financials, you mentioned, hey, this could be a lot better, but I'm really picky with my tenants because you want to make sure it's not just a warm body that may or may not pay rent. You want to make sure it's the right fit. So, you purposely hold that empty unless the right person comes along.
Yeah, that's basically just to help me. Like I've worked so hard on these properties that I don't want to risk a new tenant that's going to upset the balance. So even if I have multiple vacancies, I will stagger moving people in so that I can get a sense of how they're living in the first few weeks of their tenancy to see if they're the right fit. I'm pretty good about vetting people at this point. I've been doing it for about 10 years now, but there's always people that slip through the cracks.
Mhm.
And they just run so smoothly and so well now that I haven't wanted to risk disturbing that. So yeah, I would say I generally run it at a higher vacancy than other people would run those kind of buildings for sure. But there's definitely room. I'm going to run an experiment, and I'm gonna run it at a lower vacancy. So there's definitely room to have a lower vacancy inside those units for sure.
And then between the converted houses, what is the rent range that you're charging?
Generally, shared units across the board are 550 to 650. For the private units, I think the least expensive private unit I'm renting right now, there's one person who's grandfathered in at $800 a month. So that's the least expensive private unit, but all the rest of them are 9 to 11.
Which actually isn't that low for these to
No.
be boarding houses, like a bachelor or a one bed apartment to be between, what did you say, 900 to 1100?
Yeah.
Like,
It's
yeah.
the exact same rate as I'm getting at my micro studios in the brand new building. Exactly
Yeah.
the same. Yeah.
Let's talk about your brand new building. That one is very neat. And you said that you put the concrete and steel foundation in there to make sure that it was built right from the beginning.
Yeah, the concrete and steel structure, I didn't choose to do that. It was required actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was required. It was just a few inches too close to the adjacent property, so that it had to be built non-combustible. So the entire structure, it's not just the foundation, is concrete and steel, but it also means that it's rocket proof. One of the criticisms of the MLI Select program, I know this is a tangent, but one of the criticisms of that program is that these super long amortization terms, some people are saying the amortization term is longer than the lifespan of the property.
Yeah.
Uh, this is definitely not the case in this building. It's a concrete and steel structure. That building has twice the lifespan minimum. And even the buildings that I'm currently operating, the older ones, are already into that century range of how old a couple of them are, right? And they're doing just fine, right? With a little love and attention, you can keep those running indefinitely.
Yeah, I know concrete and steel. I've worked with a lot of buyers looking for buildings like that. The property managers love them because there's less likely for pests to get through and interrupt
Of
other
course.
units.
Yeah.
The tenants prefer them because everything's more quiet. There's not as much bouncing or vibration. And then the owners love them because of the longevity. So I'm glad that there's actually concrete and steel. It's just better for everybody involved on those properties.
Yeah. Yeah. And that property has all the modern amenities. So that property is fob access to both the external doors and the hallway door. Tenants can't get to floors that aren't theirs. It's extremely secure. It's got a shared laundry that produces a little bit of income monthly. The units themselves they're all pretty much identical in terms of floor plan. There's 18 of them, and they're under 300 square feet apiece. And it's all on one residential lot. So it performs quite well. Even with new construction costs, you're still several $1,000s in the plus on a month-to-month basis.
Yeah, that building's just beautiful to look at from the outside. Like it just looks like it was built well. And then I saw a unit or two in there, and anybody that's seen a new infill of the multifamily four up, four down units, it's just like that, but the units are smaller. But the same vinyl plank flooring, the white kitchen cabinets, they each have their own bathrooms. They all have their own kitchen and appliances. So it's exactly like these kind of standard pre-construction ones that we're seeing, the townhome style, but they're just smaller units, but they're very clean. And then there you have that red building there within that cluster as well. What's going on with that one?
So that's a purpose-built rooming house. That one has 15 units on it, again on a single residential lot. That one is probably the one that's the easiest and best producing in terms of income. Yeah, so it's 15 units. They do share bathrooms, and they all have their own internal kitchenettes. They rent between 550 and 650. I have no problem getting an extra 50 for people who have pets. So a few of them are a little bit more than that. And I've done all the fix-ups that need to be done there for that to run well going forward. We could maybe do a paint job on the main floor hallway, but everything is hunky-dory in there.
Something I noticed about all of your older buildings is there's a lot of really small things that most landlords would just say, let it be. But something very specific that I noticed is anywhere where there was a penetration from the main floor into the ceiling to the upstairs, or just where there's any conduit running through, everything is properly sealed off. Like it just, everything is sealed there. You can just tell it's been managed. We saw all of your furnaces, hot water tanks, all of them are pretty much brand new, give or take, like within the
Mhm.
5 years. They're
Yeah.
very new. Like you can just tell running through there that you give a crap about the properties and you're making sure it physically is in good shape for everybody that's living there.
Yeah, I want to make sure that the penetrations are all sealed up because I want it to be as fireproof as possible, right? I
Mhm.
don't want my assets to burn down, of course, so I want to make sure all that stuff is done properly. If there's ever anything that I think could be a risk to the property, I've addressed it. When I first took over these properties, they were very different, and I've done everything I can, including the tenant profile, all the upgrades that we've talked about, to make them run as smoothly and as safely as possible. And I think it's obvious. It'd be obvious to anybody who came for a walk through those properties there. I think one thing we forgot to mention is that for the five grouped properties, the new building in there that has its own laundry. The rest of them actually share a centralized laundry that's in one of the buildings that they have access to during the day. So there's a little bit more revenue there. It's not huge, but yeah,
And
we go
those are
there.
all Coinmatic laundry systems, right?
Yeah, and I just do the profit sharing with Coinomatic. You could probably make a little bit more money running your own because I do split the profits with them, but it's just less of a headache for me. They take care of all any and all servicing, and they're pretty good about coming down there if there's anything wrong.
And I do want to talk about the bathrooms. So, not every unit, but a lot of the units share bathrooms. And you mentioned that you have a limit on how many tenants use the bathroom.
For bathrooms that have more sharing, I always have somebody in place that is cleaning those bathrooms regularly 3 times a week in some cases, or in the ones that have much less sharing that are more of a shared house scenario, we'd have them cleaned a little bit less. But that's how we run those. So people are responsible for sort of taking care of their own messes in the bathroom if they make a little bit of a mess, but we also send somebody in there to do regular cleaning. And it seems to work out that way. It seems to be you were in there, right? So it's there's nothing that was gross that
No,
you walk into that was gross. That's the best way to work it out. It does cost you a little bit of money to get them clean, but it's generally a tenant either at that property or at an adjacent property, and it doesn't cost that much.
I believe you mentioned before that there's a maximum of 3 units that will use one bathroom, right?
In in the converted houses, that's how it works in the converted houses. In the rooming houses, it's a little bit more sharing. But yeah, in the converted houses, it's generally three units sharing a bathroom. So three people, because most of them are single occupants, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a good summary of those five there. I do want to talk about the one that's a couple blocks away.
Hmm.
That one's really cool. You should talk about the history of that one.
Yeah, so that one's been a bunch of things. I should have came prepared to this conversation with more history on it, but I know that it used to be a monastery. That one it's set up a little bit differently. It is a purpose-built rooming house as well. It does have a few private units inside there. Um, but it's got shared bathrooms on each floor and it's dorm style where each bathroom will have a few of its own toilet stalls inside there and then a showering or bathing facility inside there. It's a three-story. It's got 27 units in there, three of which are private. And that's where my guy Thomas is looking
Oh,
after that place.
Thomas.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that one runs like clockwork as well. I've only had that for a couple of years, but it's been an excellent performer. I've done significant upgrades in there as well, mostly mechanical systems and then fixturing that were just getting to the end of their lifespan. The last guy I had come and look at the radiant heating system said that it was one of the best maintained heating systems that he'd ever seen, and that it had at least another 30 years of lifespan
And
going
that's
in
the
it.
one with the internal weeping tile as well, right?
That's correct.
I've
Yeah.
never seen that before. I'll admit that. And that was really cool to see myself.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that before myself, but it was a really novel solution, I thought, to ensure the longevity of that foundation.
Yeah. Another thing, I think at least two of your buildings, maybe three, the basements, I don't want to call them crawl spaces, but they're probably maybe 6 feet high.
Yeah, yeah, they dip down to
Yeah.
6 feet where the ducting is.
And
Yeah.
it's just this huge wide open space, and in the one that's a couple blocks away you have so much stuff down there. It's organized, but like you have a workshop pretty much down there for
Yeah,
any maintenance stuff. You
that's right.
have space, plenty of space for extra appliances, which of course is great as appliances break and need fixing, as everybody has to deal with. So I think that's a huge bonus, because most multifamily buildings I look at, especially built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, all they have for storage for management is these awkward little closets underneath the stairs that are always on a slope and you can't fit anything in there other than a broom and maybe a lawnmower. So for you to have that much storage on your property for management to use as well is really great.
Yeah, it took us a while to get there, but at this point I have one whole basement that's dedicated just to paint supplies and a painting station. And I've got another one that has all the cleaning stuff. I've got another one that has all of the furniture, the boxed up furniture ready to assemble. Yeah, and I've got another one that has appliances. It's if it's kept organized like that, things are so simple, and having the extra workspace, especially heated workspace, makes things go so much smoother and faster. It's much easier to see what you have on hand so that you're not rebuying things that you already own. It's much easier to keep organized as well, right?
No, no, it'll save time too. So then Thomas isn't, oh, toilet seal isn't working. We need another wax ring. You're like, oh, now I have to
Oh
go to
yeah.
Home Depot and grab one. No, he can
He
just go
knows
down
exactly where
there,
those are.
solve
Yeah.
the problem.
You saw how he organized his cleaning supplies. It looked like it was organized by a robot down there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 27 unit, that has each unit has their own kitchenette, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And is that the building where all of them are induction stovetops? Or is that
So no, there are some electrics in there. There are some
mm,
electrics in there, but as those appliances are being replaced, I've moved towards induction cooktops just because they're so much safer, right?
mhm.
It's much like I don't have any electric burner hot plates in there, for example, with which is pretty typical of rooming house units. They'll typically use your $50 two burner electric hot plates, and
Mhm.
those can definitely be dangerous to the point where like insurance companies are asking you to use these in any of your units, right? I don't, and I think it's a good idea to have those induction hot plates because you can't even, they won't even turn on if you don't have a pot on there, right?
Yeah, I do want to talk about the general tenant profile of the people that live in your buildings.
I do still deal with a fair number of people that receive some sort of income assistance, whether it's from the government or other things. There are a lot more people that are young people that are working. We have some working immigrants. So the profile is totally different. Like everybody who's in there is an upstanding person, right? We don't have anybody who's a hoarder. We don't have anybody who's like even unclean really at this point. We don't have any pests. There's no drugs at all.
What do you do to screen tenants? Are you using your gut or like how do you screen them?
I I go and meet them off site if I can. So one of the best things you can do, in my opinion, this is a across the board property manager thing, I would say, go meet the person where they live. Go meet the person wherever they're staying right now. I realize that's a huge extra step. That's something that may not be feasible to a property manager that's managing 400 units. I get it. But if you can go meet somebody where they live and have a 10-minute conversation with them, just ask them questions about themselves, it's amazing what people will reveal. And it's amazing what people will reveal about how they live just from where they're living right now. If that's a possibility, if you can convince somebody to do that, I always do that. And that's the biggest step right there. But after a while, you become very attuned to the people that aren't going to be the right fit.
And then we were talking about how you would be open potentially to a VTB for these properties.
Yeah, if that's something that's attractive to a buyer, I think these are the kind of properties that it might make sense for because they are all income producing properties. So it's something that would make sense for a potential buyer.
Mhm. And then you also mentioned that when the buyer comes along to purchase these properties, that you would be open to pretty much an orientation with them on how to run the property. And you didn't give me a timeline, I think, but you said you would be open to managing it for a couple months and then teaching them the ropes along the way, just so that they can take over from you smoothly, which I thought was very nice of you.
Yeah, I think that it would make sense to co-manage with whoever the new person is going to be, just because all these systems that have been put in place over the years, learning those, there'd be a little bit of a learning curve there, but it'd be worth it. I'm certain that a new owner or a new manager would want to change some things and do some things their own way, but it might be valuable for them to see how it's been done up until now because it's been done that way for a reason, right? It's been done that way to make management easier. It's been done that way to keep the wrong people out. It's been done that way to maximize profits as well, right?
Yeah, I'm sure people listening after all this awesome stuff we're talking about with your properties between the tenants and the physical structure of the building, they're going to want to know, why are you selling if you put so much work into this?
I think that I'm at the point where I think I might just want to try something new, whether that's in real estate. I had my hand at developing that one property, and I think I'd be okay at that as well. I think I could do something larger scale than my new apartment building, and I have the right people that I can form a team with there. Yeah, I think that's of most of why I would try and I don't know. I guess I'm being adventurous. I don't know if that's the
Yeah.
right answer.
I think you've gotten all the experience you can out of these properties. Like you've
I
been
think
running
so
them
too.
for, I think you said 10
It's
years.
about 10 years. Yeah, it's about 10 years that I've been working with these properties.
Yeah, I think you're familiar with them by now. So
Yeah,
you're just looking to switch it up and maybe move on to something else.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And then on the last note, we were going to list this publicly and then we decided to hold off. Can you explain why we're maybe waiting a year or two to publicly list this?
for sure. Yeah, I think that in our discussions, I think that it's clear, like I've provided you with all the real numbers there, but it's clear to me that I could run these for another year or two and show way better returns, right? So I've done all the major stuff on these buildings. There doesn't need to be as high of a vacancy rate for renovations specifically as there has been. I think that I could show a level of return that might make them, a few of them specifically, way more attractive to a
Yeah.
potential investor.
You were talking about the price jump between your rent that you're forecasting on some of your units. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so they're just not reflected in the previous fiscal year's numbers. So most of the price adjustments has already occurred. It's just the reporting that's gone on was from mostly from 2024, and that was the period that rents started to increase. So now for the 27 unit building, I think there's nearly a $2,000 difference in monthly revenue between 2023 and 2025. So it's a big jump. I'm sure everybody who's in this business knows how much rents went up in 2024, and that there's no exception in this one. In fact, I would say these types of properties are much more recession proof. Like you're never going to see once a rental price is at a certain point, there'd never be a downswing. That absolutely never. So the people who are accessing these units, they're looking for what they can afford, especially if they're on some form of government assistance. And it'd be tough to beat the pricing in any Canadian market for these kinds of units.
Most of your units aren't fancy, except for your brand new one, of course, but
Mhm.
they are safe, they are clean, they are quiet, and they are affordable, which isn't
Absolutely.
something that your competitive properties are able to say about themselves.
And I would probably say about those, just from looking at them in the past, is that they haven't been protected from the big calamities that could affect them. So, which is mostly fire, water infiltration, and then structural deficiencies. Right. I went into it from day one thinking of this as a long-term project, and I've acted accordingly. And I don't think most buildings in the same category you could say that about.
Is there any final notes that you want to make sure people know about your buildings before we sign off?
I don't think so. I would thank you for learning about all these.
Yeah.
I'm quite proud of them. Yeah, thanks, Megan.
Yeah, I've told you a couple times already, but I'm genuinely excited about these properties. I can just tell by you as a person and then physically seeing your properties that you've done such a good job with them. You are proud of them. When I learned of these properties, I was expecting some kind of a slumlord, to be honest, and you were
Yeah.
the complete opposite. Yeah, I've told a couple people about you, and they know you as the great landlord guy, just so you know.
Oh,
So yeah, I've definitely made
interesting.
a great impression. Your properties have made a fantastic impression as well. I do think they're the diamond in the rough for the area. You've just done such a great job with them in all aspects. And yeah, I don't have to pretend to be proud of these properties. I just am. And I didn't even do anything on them. You did all of
That,
it. But yeah,
that's
I
very
do
nice
really
to
like them
hear.
a lot.
I really appreciate that, Megan. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So you are looking to sell, but we're keeping it off market just for now so you can pump your rents up. So those listening that are interested, he is looking to sell, but he's trying to pump the rents up himself. If you are interested in purchasing and you want to bump up the rents yourself, then you can reach out to me for further details about pricing and exact addresses, and we can go from there.
Sounds great. That's perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, AJ.
Thank you, Megan.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Bye bye.
Bye.